Jonesboro, Georgia is where Andrew lives. And Andrew chimes in and he says, would college football benefit from media embracing bias instead of acting like they don't have connections to schools or regions? He says, I'm a big fan of the English Premier League, and most in the media are former players, and many are open about wanting their former teams to succeed. The Trent Crims of the world, formerly of The Independent, because everything I know about the EPL essentially comes from Ted Lasso. So this is an interesting question. You know the word bias. Everyone uses it. Bias is when you're disproportionately leaning one way because you have usually an emotional attachment. If you graduated from Ohio State and then you go on to cover college football, the allegation is that you could never be fair towards Ohio State. Why? Because you graduated from Ohio State. I watched Kirk Herbstreit probably be about as professional as anyone has ever been in the history of college football. I watched Kirk Herbstreit when they would broadcast Ohio State games, when game day would go to Ohio State, or when they would talk about Ohio State, he would purposefully lean away. He would purposefully offer contrarian points of view just to overdo the fact that, hey, I'm not biased towards Ohio State, and still those people would come for him. Every time Kirk Herbstreit would sneeze, someone would say, sounded like a Buckeye sneeze to me. Get him, guys. That was message board culture. It was sometimes pre-Twitter culture, but it certainly became social media culture. Herbstreit, I don't know if it's directly correlated, but he just said, peace, Columbus. He moved to Nashville. And all the while, I remember asking myself, if I didn't know the past, so I'm a kid in the early 2000s, if I didn't know the past and I just watched his work, I never would have even sensed it. A newcomer to college football that did not know Kirk Herbstreit played at Ohio State, they would never have sensed it. So I thought he did great work, but it's the same reason when people come to me, I mean by the dozens per week, and ask, hey, who'd you root for growing up? What kind of idiot would I have to be to answer that question? And then I give you guys an answer and you don't believe it. I tell you Iowa State, and you just think, well, there's no way someone in Georgia could root for Iowa State. Well, there is a way. But the question was, if everyone has bias, should they just embrace it? Should people openly root for the teams that they're covering if they have bias towards that team? Or what about this? What about if you graduated from Tennessee and you cover Florida? What if you graduated from Florida and you cover Tennessee? Should you have this thin layer of anti-Florida or Tennessee over your work? I don't know. I do think that sometimes it's assumed regardless. I don't think it's a bad thing, though. This is why I've never really preferred one way or the other, is my answer. If you hardcore root for a team, as long as you're kind of open about it, I get it. I still think you can do very, very worthwhile work. There are a lot of folks in the 24/7 sports network that work on the team side of things that graduated from the schools they cover. Certainly, I think if I were to hook them up to a polygraph machine and ask, would you prefer the home team to win today? I think their answer is going to be yes. Or if it's no, I think that little pen's going to spike all over the place. Yeah, they want them to do it. As long as you're willing to be fairly critical of the program, if you're willing to ask the tough questions, if you're willing to offer a balanced counterpoint view, if you're not picking them to win every week 30-0, even though they're a 3-point dog, I'm fine with it. I don't care about that. But there's the other side of it too. The Gary Danielson protocol, as I always call it. Gary Danielson, CBS employee, obviously, full disclosure, I'm told I need to do that. Gary Danielson has covered the SEC for a long time now. I think that switch happened in the mid-2000s. So if you're in college right now, you've only known Gary Danielson as the color analyst on the CBS 3:30 game of the week on Saturday. And it seems like everyone who speaks about him has a problem. Now, there is a solid chunk of folks who have no problem with or even like Gary Danielson, but they don't speak up. So the only voices you ever hear are the voices who are anti-Gary Danielson. And everyone is anti-Gary Danielson, or everyone who is anti-Gary Danielson is anti-Gary Danielson for the same reason. Why is it? Well, he hates my team. Well, I would contend he doesn't. I would contend he probably doesn't even care. And if he does have favoritism, it's obviously not bled through because there's no consensus out there on the one team he loves. And if you say Alabama, That's only because everyone thinks everyone in the media loves Alabama. And the reason they think it is because they speak positively about Alabama and have for a long time. But I have this crazy theory that they've spoken positively about Alabama for a long time because it happens to be the greatest dynasty in the history of college football. That's my wild theory. You rack up half a dozen national championships, people are going to tend to talk good about you. So I listen to folks talk about Gary Danielson. I used to be a Braves, well, I still am a Braves fan, but I used to watch all the national broadcasts. You know, when the internet started to change, like I was in a perfect position. So I'm a younger kid as the concept of message boards start to come around. And so you start to be able to interact with other people, not just at the mall, like in school, you're interacting with people online. And you're starting to find out for the first time what people from all over the country think about certain things. Well, naturally, I gravitated towards the college football rooms and whatnot, and I see that, or Major League Baseball too, I would see that everyone thinks that ESPN hates the Braves. Joe Buck, Fox, they hate the Braves. And I'm like, well, first off, I fell for it. But then the more I thought about it, the more I realized if I would just watch these guys independently, I wouldn't feel that way as much. And even if I felt that way, if I would examine it more critically, I would realize they're not paid to cover my team from the same approach that the late Skip Carey or Pete Van Wieren, the late Pete Van Wieren, Joe Simpson, the late Don Simpson, those were the Braves guys back in the day. They're not paid at the national level to cover in the same manner that the home team broadcasters are. Well, you grew up on the home team broadcasters. You see those guys and hear those guys 6 days out of the week. Or if you're a college football fan, you listen to, like back in the day in Georgia, it would have been Larry Munson, or at Alabama, Eli Gold, or you can pick your hometown announcer from wherever you want to. But the point is, you would listen to them on the radio, or if you still do listen to them on the radio, that is a much different flavor, as it should be, than if you hear the CBS crew, or the Fox crew, or the ABC crew. Just because they don't fawn all over your fullback, picking up 4 yards and a first down and start talking about his hometown and get you caught up on what his sister just did in a recital last week, doesn't mean they hate you. And also, if they point out negative things, doesn't mean they hate you, if they're true. So I've never had a problem with bias because I've never viewed it through the same lens. I don't constantly pick apart broadcasts. I don't pick apart articles and try and snuff it out. So I've never cared about it one way or the other. I know I'm in the minority, though, because you guys ask me about this stuff all the time, and a lot of people accuse me of it. I guess the other thing I would say about bias is the reason I started to laugh at it so much is when I got into our business, I found out what it's like to be accused of biases that you don't hold. Daily, multiple times daily, people accuse me of hating a team or loving a team that I'm totally indifferent to. And whereas it used to be, I would watch someone accuse someone else of something, and I would just kind of guess whether they were right or wrong. I know me, like I know my heart, my soul, whichever portion of the body those are in. I know where the heart is, but the soul is, it could be head, could be toe, could be anywhere. I know what's in there. Like when you tell me, oh man, I could tell you're not a really big fan of Arizona State football, are you? What are you talking about? Lately it's been Florida, obviously. I could tell you hate Florida. No, you can't, because I don't. It's impossible for you to be able to tell that. So anyway, bias, not going anywhere, at least in the form of an allegation, but bias is sometimes, nay, a lot of times, overblown.